right, welcome. We are back at Radford's. It's October 5th, the beginning of the fall season, a little cooler today, and I welcome you all here. Um, as per usual, I'm going to go with a few minutes at the notes at the top of the hour. My radio background. This will be a 3-minute intermission, and then we'll go to the main meeting. So today I want to let you know that we are not going to be taping and zooming our meetings live, but they will be on the Sisters in Crime website behind the members only section. So we will be able to record these and see them later. But we're trying to encourage people to come out because creativity needs companionship. And when you get out and you see what's going on and who's around and talk about what your projects are, it's amazing what kind of results from that and who may be able to help you. So hopefully this will encourage people to take advantage of that. So that's the reason why if you have friends who stayed home today, of the 65 people who signed up, they're not going to be able to see this until later next week. Too bad. I like trick or treats. Okay. So real quick, I'm going to go through a few announcements. Next month, Dennis Palumbo, who I'm beginning to think is our resident psychiatrist, is coming back. And if anybody feels like they have trouble writing through difficult times, Dennis is going to have some answers for that because that is what happens. He can give his privates. And then Renee in the back there, raise your hand, Renee, is also a licensed psychologist and works with companies and she works in newsrooms, by the way, working with analyzing news, people who are on the scene with hardships and so forth and how they need to get back to work and so forth. So she's always around. So between Dennis and Renee, I think we could fill their clock real well. Okay, you're not leaving the room either with it. And we're all a little loony or we wouldn't be writing, right? So, and then I'm right with you. And then December, we've got John Lindstrom, and many of you know him as an actor on General Hospital. He's also a director, producer, musician, and the last several years has written 2 books, Hollywood Hustle and Hollywood Payback, and he'll be here in December. In addition to our December activities, is December 14th. You're going to receive an invitation, save the date. December 7th is our regular meeting, but December 14th is going to be our holiday party. So you'll be getting information about that. We are going to be doing it again with MWA. Should be a fun activity. So stay tuned. I also want to say this is election season. As you know, our new board will be, you'll be able to vote for the new board that comes out in the November issue of the ransom notes. And I've been president for 2 years. I've absolutely loved working with this group, but I am going to step down as president and I'm going to be on the board. So you don't get rid of me, but you're not going to see me as much. I'm going to be pulling some strings behind the screen, whatever you want to call it, which I kind of like to do coming from radio. That works out well. And so there'll be some new names. Dan is our vice president, and it's going to be stepping up to the presidency. So you'll see his name on the board. Yeah, Dan White, stand up. I'm going to say something nice about Dan. Dan has been a tremendous help to me. And this job as president, I told him, oh, listen, it's like a piece of cake. It's wonderful. You're just going to love it. It's just a walk in the park. I've got 3 other presidents here. They're still alive. We are going to talk. But Dan has stepped up he stepped up on the condition that I do stay on the board, and I am going to stay on the board. And I'm looking forward to that and giving my chance to get back to writing a little bit. So that said, I want to introduce Peggy Rothschild, who is going to be met on our board. Peggy is a current Speakers Bureau, and Peggy's done some wonderful things. We have now been invited, not only at the LA County Library, but the LA Library System as well, to bring speakers out. And this is because this wonderful lady, let me tell you, let me have a hand for her. She not only reads full time, she's at every Speakers Bureau event and introduces the authors. And one of the goals when I took over the presidency was to build platforms for authors, new and experienced, to get out and meet with readers. And couldn't do that alone, couldn't do that without Peggy. And so Peggy has taken that over, and we shine. But here, why don't you tell them where we were yesterday and what's coming up.
Okay, yeah, yesterday we were at the Buena Vista branch of the Burbank Library. They have a lovely function room, and they had invited us to be part of the Friends of the Library 45th anniversary celebration. So we had 4 authors on a panel talking about their books, and it was fun. And we are at Agora every month at their library, the third Saturday of the month, and they are in the process of doing a memo of understanding for next year, because you have to do that with the county library. And so we will be back in Agora next year. So if you have a new book coming out next year or at the end of this year, let me know, contact me so I can get you on the schedule. I haven't picked themes or anything, but it's always the third Saturday of the month unless they change it. The other thing is I've been in touch with the Ventura Library, and I'm waiting. I actually heard back from the head librarian, very excited about us coming out to do presentations there. And I'm waiting to hear back from the person who's actually in charge of setting those up. And so hopefully there'll be more information about that soon. Well, on the Speakers Bureau, part of what, rather than having having to read books and get ready for the December one, I'm actually ending up a big reading push for something else. We've decided, instead of having a panel on the third Saturday in December, it's going to be seasons readings, and any authors here who want to next meeting bring a signed copy of one of your books here, I will then take them to Agora to give out to interested readers. They have like 5 different book clubs there. It's a very active reading community, so if you'd like to participate, please do. Otherwise, I'll just give them away, all my author copies. Okay, thank you very much.
Isn't she great? You know, that's one of the real things that I think is so nice, is that when an author begins to write, it's so difficult to let somebody else see your work. It really isn't an easy thing to do. And so this organization, one of the things we hope to do is kind of shoulder that with you and kind of push you out the door. And because Peggy's made such fantastic work within libraries, where libraries then will also take the author's work and put them on the shelves. And this is the first time many authors get to be out there and get to be heard. So it's really wonderful. So thank you so much. So that said, I'm not going to waste any more time because we have a very important speaker here today. And I'm going to have Dan come up, and he's going to make an introduction for our reader, and then we're going to introduce our speaker. So here we go, Dan.
Thank you. Take the star seat, Patty. Come on. Ta-da. I have been shown up, Patty. I don't think so. Patricia Smiley is the author of the Tucker Sinclair Mysteries and the Pacific Homicide Police Procedural Series, inspired by her 15 years as a volunteer and a specialist reserve officer with the Los Angeles Police Department. Her short fiction has appeared in Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine and Two of the Deadliest, an anthology edited by Elizabeth George. A Dark September Night is the first book in her new Justice Bay series, set in the fictional coastal town in Northern California, featuring marketing director turned amateur sleuth Emmeline McCoy. Patty has taught writing at various writers' conferences across the U.S. and Canada. She is the former president of Sisters in Crime Los Angeles and currently serves on the board of Southern California chapter of Mystery Writers of America. She lives in Los Angeles with her loyal and opinionated Siberian forest cat, along with a backyard feeding station for possums, raccoons, marauding cats, and other critters searching for snacks and a cool drink of water. Despite the distractions, work on the second Justice Bay book continues. Patty.
Thank you. Thank you. I shall now don my glasses. This is from chapter 1. The early morning telephone call jarred me out of a sound sleep and into a nightmare, threatening my day and perhaps my career. A prominent tour group had canceled their ship reservations just before the no refund policy kicked in. As marketing director for Fortuna Cruise Lines, my boss expected me to fill those cabins immediately, if not sooner. I raced to work, hoping to outrun an erupting volcano. Pre-dawn light cloaked the city when I arrived at our corporate headquarters. As I dashed down the hallway toward my office to begin panic calling, I glanced out the window at the downtown Los Angeles skyline. I'd seen this view hundreds of times at all hours of the day, but today seemed different. Across the street, the first ray of morning sun reflected off the skyscraper's glass windows. The bright beam caught me unawares as it burned into my retinas with the intensity of halogen headlights. My eyelids slammed shut. Lightning flashes pierced the darkness. My world began to spin, and the smell of cinnamon overwhelmed me. I flattened my palms against the window until the dizziness receded, and I could steady myself enough to reopen my eyes. I had no idea what had just happened, only that the burning headlights had disappeared, but the aroma of cinnamon, oddly enough, remained. Cinnamon? Giving myself a mental head shake, I detoured into the lunchroom to investigate the source of the scent. Hey, babe, what's up? Tall, blonde, and lean Brad Gerber sat at a table, hunched over a cappuccino and the Wall Street Journal. Brad and I had been work friends for years until 4 months ago when we had a short fling. No company policy barred employees from dating, so during those first 3 months, we enjoyed day sailing a rented 32-foot sloop on Santa Monica Bay, watched the latest art films, and ate at our favorite mom and pop Mexican restaurants. There were many reasons for our breakup, including the challenges of being together all day at work and during our off hours. But a month ago, Brad landed in my should have known better file after breaking the cardinal rule of office boyfriends. He shared intimate details of our relationship with coworkers, even exaggerating them for laughs. For the record, I rarely sing show tunes in the shower, and certainly not off key. I devoted 10 years of my life to this job, and with the rumors of a possible promotion to vice president floating in the ether, I couldn't bear the thought of office gossip derailing all my hard work. Please don't call me babe. He looked around the room. What's the big deal? Nobody's in here except us. Brad had his charms, but that babe comment had passed its sell-by date. We agreed to keep our relationship professional, remember? His smile ratcheted up to 11. Sorry, Ms. McCoy, Miss Emmeline McCoy, Emma, Emma, Bob, Emma, Banana, Fana, Fo, Femma, Fee, Fi, Fo, Femma, Emma. I rolled my eyes and changed the subject to avoid saying anything I'd regret later. My gaze swept the counter near the refrigerator as I sniffed the air. Did somebody bring in cinnamon rolls? He shrugged. Nope. There are a couple of stale bagels in the fridge, though. That didn't make sense. The fragrance was pungent. If the odor hadn't come from here, it must have drifted into the hallway from another office. I turned to leave. Just so you know, Brad said, even though we broke up, I still think you're hot. Brad's cheeky come on signaled an intentional effort to provoke me. I ignored it for now because payback delayed wasn't necessarily payback denied. On entering my office, my desk phone rang. I hesitated before answering, fearing more bad news. As it turned out, the news wasn't just bad. It would change my life forever. I shall now take off my glasses. Oh, there you are. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love that. And they're out. It's out now. Is that right, Patty? Fantastic. Oh, lovely. Wonderful. Congratulations. Next, Peggy is going to introduce our keynote speaker today. That's right. I'm going to take mine off.
I'm honored to get to introduce Nicholas Meyer. Nicholas Meyer is an award-winning author, screenwriter, and director. His body of creative work in publishing, film, and television spans more than 5 decades. Meyer's seventh Sherlock Holmes novel, Sherlock Holmes and the Real Thing, came out from Mysterious Press at the end of August 2025. He's the author of 7 previous novels, including The 7% Solution, a Doyle tale in which Sherlock Holmes met Sigmund Freud. The novels, just wait. The novel sold more than 2 million copies, stayed on the New York Times bestseller list for 40 weeks, won the British Gold Dagger Award from the British Crime Writers Association. 2 years later, Meyer received an Academy Award nomination for his screenplay of the eponymous film, which starred Nicole Williamson, Robert Duvall, Alan Arkin, Vanessa Redgrave, and Laurence Olivier. So well done. Meyer made his directing debut in 1979 with the film he wrote, Time After Time. Yes, starring Malcolm McDowell, Mary Steenburgen, and David Warner. He went on to direct Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Other directing credits include Volunteers with Tom Hanks in 1986, The Deceivers with Pierce Brosnan in 1988, Company Business with Gene Hackman, 1991, Star Trek VI, I did that right. Roman numerals throw me. Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country with Christopher Plummer in 1992, and the HBO film Vendetta with Christopher Walken in 1999. His screenplays include Summersby with Richard Gere and Jodie Foster in 1993, and contributions to Fatal Attraction, 1987, and DreamWorks' Prince of Egypt in 1998. His other books include Target Practice, which was nominated for an Edgar Award, and 5 other Holmes novels, Sherlock Holmes and the Telegram from Hell in 2024, The Adventure of the Peculiar Protocols in 2019, The West End Horror, also a New York Times bestseller in 1976, The Canary Trainer in 1993. I wonder if that date was right. Anyway, The Return of the Pharaoh in 2021. His autobiographical novel, Confessions of a Homing Pigeon, was published in 1981. Meyer's memoir, The View from the Bridge, Memories of Star Trek and a Life in Hollywood, was published in 2009. He's currently working on his 7th Sherlock Holmes novel. Myers directed ABC's The Day After in 1983, which remains the single most watched television film ever. 100 million people in one night, and was nominated for 14 Emmys. Additional work includes a 2-part miniseries, Houdini, with Adrian Brody in 2014, based on his father, Bernard C. Myers' biography. He is the co-creator of the Netflix series Medici, Masters of Florence, starring Dustin Hoffman, and worked on Star Trek Discovery for CBS Access. Born and raised in New York City, Nicholas Meyer was graduated from the University of Iowa with a degree in theater and filmmaking. He lives in Santa Monica, California, and apparently never sleeps. Please welcome Nicholas Meyer.
Thank you very much. My whole life just flashed before my eyes. Thanks very much for coming out in such inclement weather to hear me dilate. Yes, I have been writing Sherlock Holmes books for apparently a very long time. And I have a long history with forgery. I did not plan to be a forger, but I found out that I was one when my first Sherlock Holmes novel, The 7% Solution, which I wrote during a Writers Guild strike. We always strike when we get the chance. And I was walking up and down and picketing outside the Goldwyn studios, and weren't allowed to write screenplays. And my girlfriend at the time said, well, now you can write that Sherlock Holmes meets Sigmund Freud book that you keep rattling on about. And in truth, I didn't have anything else to do. So I wrote the book. I wrote it as a sort of corrective to the fact that I really couldn't stand any Sherlock Holmes movies. They just made me crazy. I read, this is a free association talk. My dad gave me the complete Holmes stories when I was about 11. There's a reason why this is called an impressionable age. I think that childhood experiences with art, with people, with music are often the most lasting, and the imprinting is terribly deep. So I fixated on many things back then. And I seem to have never let go of any of my passions. I've added to them. In any case, the Holmes thing stayed with me. How Sigmund Freud entered into it. Well, my father was a shrink. It's a long story. We can get into it if you're still here after sundown. In any case, um, I wrote this because I didn't like Basil Rathbone hanging out with a jerk. I never understood why a genius hangs out with a jerk. And I didn't believe that that Watson of Nigel Bruce wrote the story. So I was writing a kind of corrective. I wanted people to see that Holmes he's very vain. He wants the admiration of a regular person, not a sub-regular person. Anyway, at the end of it, it did not occur to me. I said, well, this must be publishable. This must be publishable. Did I imagine that it would go on to be the #1 best-selling novel in the United States, that I have my 15 minutes of fame? I did not. Or that there would be a movie or any of the rather pleasant things that have happened to me since. Somebody recommended a general to Napoleon and said, this guy's a very good general. And Napoleon said, I know he's good, but is he lucky? I think you're looking at lucky. Anyway, so there I was, and they sent me on a book tour. If your book is on the bestseller list, they pay. So I was 28 years old enough not to kid myself that I had, written the great American anything. 27, it might have been a dicier proposition. I thought. In any case, I landed in Pittsburgh in a thunderstorm to be met by a reporter. Can you imagine dispatching a reporter to the airport to meet an author? He was about my own age, and I think clearly thought this assignment was somewhat beneath his abilities, and perhaps he was right. His opening salvo was, so how does it feel to be a successful forger? And I was still kind of green about the gills from this landing in a thunderstorm. And all I could finally manage to gurgle out was, well, it doesn't say by Nicholas Meyer, it says as edited by. And we fumfered on from there somehow. But I do remember going to sleep in a strange Pittsburgh hotel room and thinking, holy fuck, I am a forger. I didn't think about it in those. I thought I was playing a game. And I realized somewhere along the line when somebody said, so when did Sherlock die? That a lot of people were taking this a lot more literally than perhaps I ever dreamt when I wrote. So this began my interest in forgery. And I started to read about forgery and collect books about forgery. And forgery is a labyrinth with many rabbit holes. If that's a mixed metaphor, I'm sorry. But in fact, what is the forgery poses a bunch of questions. It poses ethical questions, poses legal questions, it poses aesthetic questions, it poses cultural questions. There are many questions. What is the difference between a forgery and a copy? Something you can't see, the intention. A copy announces itself. I'm a copy. I'm labeled. You can buy me at the museum store. A forgery does no such thing. What's the difference between a forger and a plagiarist? They're opposite sides of the same coin. The plagiarist wants you to believe that somebody else's work is theirs, and the forger wants you to believe that his work is somebody else's. There's a lot of rabbit holes we're talking about here. And there's a whole other category, which we call à la manière de, in the manner of, in the style of. It's not exactly a literal copy, but it's as though you went to Chat GPT or whatever that's called and said, make me a Van Gogh. And so it will do you a kind of a quasi Van Gogh. It's not literally the same, but as the French say, à la manière de, in the manner of. Then there's something called an homage, where you add, Marcel Duchamp painting a mustache on the Mona Lisa. I suppose that's a kind of an homage, because all art, when you get down to it, is a history of cut and paste. We could say that the Odyssey is a fanboy sequel to the Iliad. We don't call it a pastiche, by the way, even though it's like a continuation of the same bunch of characters. The Aeneid would be a fanboy sequel to the Odyssey, and so on. Somebody, I don't know if it was a boy or a girl, put their handprint on the wall of a cave, and people have been doing something to that handprint ever since. We keep adding. And all art, we should add in the same breath, is invariably and ineluctably the product of the time in which it was created. Mozart doesn't just sound like Mozart, he also sounds like late 18th century Middle European music. Renoir doesn't just look like Renoir, he looks like late 19th century French Impressionism. This is how it works. If I were to show you 5 movies that are set in the year 1776, and one movie is made in 1920, and one movie is made in 1950, and one movie is made in 1983, and one movie is made in 2002, you would be able to figure out within 5 minutes and 5 years when these movies were made. Everything would be a giveaway. Is it color? Is it black and white? Is it sound? How long are the eyelashes? How are women treated? How is it lit? And then so on and so on and so forth. And we accept this. It's a reality. That's okay. But it does play hell with forgery, because forgery too is product of the time in which it was created. There was a very famous Dutch forger, I don't know how well you know Han van Meegeren, who forged Vermeers in the 30s. And they were sold for a lot of money, which, by the way, brings I'm free associating with it. If you experience a work of art, it could be a piece of music, it could be a painting, it could be a novel, and you have a profound reaction, you are deeply moved. Some people call that the Stendhal effect, where you fall to pieces in front of a painting or whatever. But if you then find out that the painting that so deeply affected you is a fake, does that somehow invalidate your emotional response? It gets very complicated. What about that diamond if it turns out to be zirconium? It's still a real diamond. It just isn't as real. I mean, but you have to have an expert. And even then, they can't tell, because things are getting harder to distinguish all the time. So the poor forger, poor Mr. Van Meegeren, when you look at his Vermeers today, They stink. They're terrible. They look like Art Deco. The only thing you can say about truly great art is that it doesn't date. We don't say about Bach, it's an oldie but a goodie. It just is is great, and it doesn't matter when it was created. But these are the kinds of things that I've been reading about and collecting books about. How many people here have seen Orson Welles' movie F for Fake? Has anybody seen F for Fake? Oh, you don't sleep. Go home. Don't listen to this. F for Fake, and I'll talk about this for a minute, is a very late piece of work by Orson Welles. And Orson Welles found out that two of the world's greatest forgers were living next door to each other on the island of Ibiza in Spain. You can only say it like this, Ibiza. And one of them was a Hungarian named Elmir Dahori, whose Modiglianis and Picassos are in museums and private homes all over the world. Picasso said, even I can fake a Picasso. But what if you find out that never mind. Anyway, and the other forger living on Ibiza next to Elmir Dahori was his biographer, a man named Clifford Irving, who then went on to forge the Howard Hughes diaries, clearly inspired by writing a biography of Elmir Dahori. And there's a wonderful movie that's not F for Fake called The Hoax with Richard Gere as Clifford Irving. Anyway, Orson Welles, I think, found out that the BBC had planned to do a documentary about Elmir Dahori, and he wound up getting his hands on all that footage. And then, intrigued by the fact that Clifford Irving was on Ibiza, it's fun to say actually, inserted himself into the movie and created what he called a new cinematic form, which was the cinema essay, F for Fake. It's about an hour and 20 minutes long. It's hilarious, and it does delve into this whole question of authenticity. If you can't tell the difference, what is the difference? If you have two paintings, hypothetical, of a smiling lady, and one lady was painted by Leonardo da Vinci, and the other painting was painted by me. And this is the question, the hypothetical. If by no technical or technological means is it possible to determine which is which, why is one better than the other? Yeah, not a lot of answers. The best answer I ever heard is that one could not have existed without the other. We place a great premium on originality. The first guy who said that a woman's lips were like a rose can lay some kind of claim to genius. The second guy who said it, maybe not so much. But if he said, a woman's lips were like a blooming flower, he was in à la manière de territory. He was coming close, but saying it in a slightly different way, but it added up to the same thing. Anyway, I thought, by way of wrapping this up and opening to questions, since we've been reading aloud from our collected works, I would read you a brief excerpt from my Sherlock Holmes forgery novel, Sherlock Holmes and the Real Thing. It doesn't take long enough, but and then if there are any questions, which I can't imagine. So in this novel, which is, I think, set in around the year 1896, I'm thinking it's not established. Dr. Watson has been assigned to chat with a gallery owner in Bond Street on behalf of Sherlock, and Watson has become infatuated with Juliet Packwood. That is her name. And so I think that's all you need to know about this couple of pages. This is Holmes and Watson in Baker Street. We were interrupted by a knock on the door. What is it, Mrs. Hudson? Our landlady was holding a telegram. The detective held out his hand. The telegram is addressed to Dr. Watson, she explained, giving it to me. Was it my imagination, or did I detect a certain smugness in her reply? If the detective was surprised, he concealed the fact. Trying to conceal my excitement, I tore open the envelope, then reached for my hat and coat. Holmes, I must ask you to accompany me. I'm presently engaged, as you see, my dear fellow. Holmes, I said sternly, causing him to look up. In our years together, I have seldom asked you for anything, and it may be said that I have toiled mightily on your behalf. Now I am asking for this. I handed them the telegram, which he read aloud. Meet me at the National Gallery at 4. Stop. Bring your friend if he exists. Stop. J.P. He looked from the telegram to the canvas and finally to me. I am asking you, Holmes. There was a fractional pause. Of course, my dear man. We arrived as Big Ben was tolling the hour. Juliet was waiting for us on the steps of the National Gallery, her tall, slender figure silhouetted before the imposing building. I hope I have not kept you waiting, said I, again breathless in her presence. Miss Packwood, this is Jasper Gilmore of Topeka, Kansas, also known as Sherlock Holmes. Miss Packwood, I trust Dr. Watson has explained and apologized for our deception, Holmes began smoothly. Mr. Holmes, why did you not truthfully disclose your identity and explain the purpose of your visit at the outset when you came to me at Packwood's gallery? She demanded, without acknowledging his greeting. Holmes anticipated this question and had his answer in readiness. I feared you might be reluctant to speak. You yourself said Lord Southbank is a dangerous man to cross. As Dr. Watson served with your father in Afghanistan, it seemed wiser to let him approach the topic indirectly. Lord Southbank is a dangerous man, she conceded before taking a breath. Come, we have not much time before closing. Let us look at some pictures and I will explain more, though I'm not sure either of you deserve it. Without waiting to see if we followed, she marched smartly up the steps and into the museum, pausing only to exchange looks. The detective and I traipsed behind through a labyrinth of more art than I ever beheld in my life. The place seemed to go on for miles, conveying the curious impression the building was larger inside than out. When Henry VIII began the Protestant faith, in order to obtain his divorce, Juliet Packwood began in the manner of a tour guide, speaking quietly over her shoulder. He succeeded in cutting England off from Catholic Europe for nearly 100 years. The unforeseen consequence was that England almost entirely missed the Renaissance. I could see from the expression on Holmes's face as he regarded me that this notion had never occurred to him. And I confess it came as news to me as well. As we spoke, we passed pictures from various epochs and a bewildering array of styles. Even to my untutored eye, I understood I was looking at masterpieces produced in wide variety by other countries in other centuries. For the better part of a century, ergo, England knew nothing of Da Vinci, remained in ignorance of Raphael, Caravaggio, Titian, Rubens, Botticelli, or Michelangelo. All we had was Holbein the Younger. She concluded with a rueful expression, gesturing as if on cue to the German painter's portrait of stout King Henry. When relations between Protestant England and the Catholic continent finally thawed, England began to see what she had missed. The reigning monarch, Charles I, most especially became enamored of Renaissance nudes. Yes, naked women were purchased by the cartload from Italy by agents of His Majesty for his private apartments at Whitehall Palace, where only he could revel in them. The nucleus of what you see here in the National Gallery originated as Charles Stuart's private property. Since you claim some familiarity with the monarch, you know from your schoolboy history, Charles I provoked a civil war which ended when Oliver Cromwell chopped off his head. The late king's art collection was now property of the Puritan Commonwealth, whose first impulse was to burn these impious images. But wiser, unsevered heads prevailed. The Civil War had bankrupted the country, and it was thought the painting's potential monetary value might help defray the expenses of the war. This may not have been history's first, but was certainly its biggest art sale. She turned and resumed walking without waiting to enjoy our astonishment. Here is a painting on wood by the Italian master Botticelli. Do you observe anything unusual? The image was another provocative nude, but it took only moments to understand why she had halted before it. But I stammered, this woman, yes, what about her? Miss Packwood crossed her arms. This time I had no need to attempt a blush, for I felt myself reddening. This woman is you. Okey doke. So you have to read the rest of it to find out how it comes out. And in any case, this is my spiel, and if there are questions, I'll do my best to answer them. I have to preface it, but by saying that Plato didn't want writers in the Republic because we're liars. And there are some questions that writers find difficult to answer, not just writers, even artists. Socrates is told by the oracle at Delphi that he's the wisest man in Greece. And he thinks that can't be right. So all I need to disprove the oracle is to find somebody wiser than myself. And so Socrates goes talking to all sections of Greek society, and finally he works his way around to the poets. And he thinks, well, these people, were probably all guys back then, who write and sculpt and paint so insightfully about the human condition are going to prove to be wiser than me. Imagine my surprise, Socrates says, when I found that the poets were the stupidest people I spoke to. They were like children, they were infantile, except when they did their art. And then they go into a kind of trance and take dictation from God. And this they call inspiration. Then they come out of it and they go back to becoming jerks again. this is my preface to the fact that I'll do my best, but it's probably just going to be anecdotal, which is what we do when we can't explain it. Gilbert said he wrote the Mikado when a samurai sword hanging over his desk fell down and almost decapitated him. It's a good story. It may even be true. It just doesn't explain how he wrote the Mikado. So fire away. Yes. I've been off for so long. Um, well, it's interesting because I made a big decision when I adapted the 7% solution into the movie. I had read a novel called Presumed Innocent by Scott Turow, I think is his name. Then I went and saw the movie, and I knew who done it because I read the book. And I thought that kind of takes some of the oomph out of it. And it was also true that while I was very happy with the 7% solution novel, certainly the first half, I wondered if the mystery that they collaborate on was really as good as the first half. So I thought I could kill two birds with one stone. One is the audience is not going to sit back and relax and watch the coffee table version of something that they'd already seen and they know who done it. But maybe I could improve. It would give me another bite of the apple. So I made up a different mystery for Freud and Holmes to collaborate on. The other thing that I think you have to be prepared to do is to be kind of ruthless. Henry James said that life is hot, but art is cool. If you are the puppeteer, you cannot be out front sobbing at the performance. You must remain backstage dry-eyed and be sure the strings don't get tangled. So rather than falling in love with myself, always a risk, I thought you better be really rigorous and be prepared to throw away things. In fact, the biggest arguments I had with Herb Ross while we were making the movie was I would say, cut this, cut this, cut this. And he would say, you're deballing, that was his word, you're deballing your own book. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm just saying it obeys a different amount of imperatives, different kind of imperatives. A movie, a drama. How does a drama work anyway? According to Aristotle, a drama works when you ask a question and the audience stays to find out the answer to the question. Will Hamlet kill the king? Will Romeo get Juliet? Once the question is answered, people go home, unless you want to stick around for Fortinbras showing up. And then it's the job of the dramatist to raise as much suspense as to the answer to the question. The business of posing the question we call exposition. How fast can you get to it? Kid comes home from college, finds out that his mother has remarried her brother-in-law. And then his father, the ghost, tells him what's happened and gives him the instructions. That's what you need to know. And then is he going to do it or is he not? He looks at him praying, he's not going to do it. But then something else happens and it looks like he will do it. He runs him through, but it isn't him, it's the other guy, and so on and so on and so forth. And you sit there until it's over. So unlike a novel, the thing has to keep moving like a shark. I begged Herb to cut out the tennis scene from the novel. He says, no, no, no. He said, everybody loves the tennis scene. So he made it work, and I was wrong. Anyway, that's not a real answer, is it? But it's close to it. It's close. It's a little bit. Yes. Well, I write these books. You write for money. Dr. Johnson said a man is a blockhead who writes for any other reason. Um, and I write them when I get an idea that won't let go, that I think this is a Sherlockian idea. And it has to be a good idea, and it has to be insertable, if that's a word, into the chronology. I'm a purist. I'm trying to write as best I can like Arthur Conan Doyle. I am not interested in Sherlock's daughter or his cousin or whatever. I'm uh, I'm a liberal bleeding heart, but as a Holmesian, I am arch conservative. I just want it the way it was when I was 11, and I read it. And uh, some of them, I like that one without a clue, where Watson is the smart one and Holmes is the dummy. I like the Billy Wilder, the private life, but basically, I like it on the page the way it was, and again with all the limitations that forgers face, which we were talking about before. I'm trying to do that. I was once up for a movie being produced by Roger Birnbaum. I went to meet him, and it was called Young Sherlock Holmes. And I said, what's the story about?" And he said, "It's about how Holmes and Watson met in high school." And I said, "No, they didn't. Very short meeting." Um, so I have to wait for an idea that really won't let go. I was always intrigued by the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, which is such a frightening document. If you're unfamiliar, you either can read my novel, which I recommend, or you can Google the protocols of the most famous, vicious, long lasting, indestructible hoax of all time. It's the adventure of the peculiar protocols. Yeah, that's it. My book is called The Adventure of the Peculiar Protocols. It's a different novel. Um, but what the protocols were, and they were disseminated in 1903 by the Okhrana, the secret police of Nicholas II. Um, they purport to be the minutes of a secret meeting of Jews plotting to take over the world. And they're taught throughout the Middle East as textbooks. Egypt, there was a TV series of the protocols. Henry Ford published all of them in his newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, which had the largest circulation of any newspaper except the Daily News. Published them all as if they were real, until they got sued for libel, and these things have been exposed countless times. They're not even real forgeries. It's worse than that. They're a plagiarized forgery. You have to read the novel. Um, I can't remember the question, but that's my answer. Yes. I Yeah, for the record, I'm not a genius, but hard worker, maybe, plagiarist a little bit, forger. You know, I I do the best I can within my own limitations. I think it's dangerous to. It's not that I don't read reviews and I want to know what people say and what they think. But the ones that get to me are the bad reviews. Those are the ones where you feel gored, um, and you want to shake your fist or think, "Oh, maybe they're right," or "Well, thank you." Yes. Oh, I'm definitely a Doyle forger. I'm trying to within the limit. The thing is that Holmes, I've learned over the years, is a kind of avatar or mouthpiece for me. There are certain things I can't make him say. If you read the 60 stories, you will find occasionally light racist or anti-Semitic stuff coming out of his mouth. That's distasteful to me. I'm not going to do it. On the other hand, Doyle also was pretty disciplined about what he would let Holmes do. For example, in 1916, Doyle came out believing in spiritualism. World War One, everybody got killed. People lost husbands, brothers, fathers, sons. There was a big rise in Ouija boards and communing with the dead. Doyle had lost a brother-in-law, and a son in that bloodbath. So 1916, he came out and for the rest of his life espoused this belief, this conviction. But he was disciplined enough never to make Sherlock Holmes a spiritualist. He says, this agency stands flat-footed on the ground. No ghosts need apply. And that was an act of discipline. So there are limits to what I can make Sherlock plausibly do or not do. And I try to color within the lines. Yes. It's better than that. It's way better than that. The Van Meegeren story is such. I've wanted to make a movie of this forever. Um, did you write a book about it? The painting that he forged, by the way, um, he initially set out to be a forger to teach the art world a lesson. He was going to forge a Vermeer, and after it had been authenticated, he'd blow the whistle. But when he found out that the Vermeer he forged was going to go for 100,000 pounds, he rethought the whole thing and then started cranking them out. Meanwhile, I differ from George Washington. George could not tell a lie. I can, but I won't. So what happened was Hitler and Goebbels were very, very greedy, and Goering actually was the one. It was Goering who was the big, and so when Van Meegeren learned that Goering really wanted to own a Vermeer, he painted one. It was Goering, and he painted one, and he named some astronomical price, and Goering agreed to it. And then Van Meegeren had another thought, and he said, hang on, forget about the price. I'll take it in trade. And he traded him for like 35 Dutch masterpieces that Goering had in his possession. And he took it back. And at the end of the war, when Van Meegeren was exposed and he went on trial for selling Dutch masterpieces out of the country, Vermeers, he had been selling Vermeers, which was a capital offense. So he got put on trial, and all the techniques he had perfected were used in evidence against him. Look at this paint, ladies and gentlemen, it's hard, rock hard, and on and on and on. And this guy was going to swing. And what he finally wound up saying is, wait. I can prove I forged. I'm going to do it right here in this courtroom. You can watch. And the headline was, Van Meegeren paints for his life. It's quite a story. Yes. Yeah. Go ahead. It sounds better. Okay. I'm an homagist. Yes. No, no, everything about me is like unplanned. I'm not a good strategist. We're still looking for what I'm good at, but I'm not I didn't strategize. You sort of, when I wound up doing the day after is a perfect example. First of all, I was the third or fourth director asked to direct that movie because nobody wants to deal with nuclear war. The worst thing about nuclear war is that nobody wants to talk about it. We hope it won't happen. But hope is not a strategy. So I was offered to do this. I was being psychoanalyzed at the time. I was about 30 years old. I'm lying on the couch and talking to myself, and because they don't talk, uh, you do all the heavy lifting in Freudian analysis. I'm trying to rationalize my way. I'm saying I have 2 hit movies under my belt. There's a lot of pretty women in this town. I'm having a great time. I don't really want to. I mean, and by the way, you're not supposed to go from features to television. That's a no. I'm chattering a mile away, and he finally opens his mouth. And he says, well, I think this is where we find out who you really are. Checkmate. I didn't know how to wriggle off that hook. It's not planned. It wasn't planned. I fell into it. I didn't know how to answer that question. So it's not whether I'm doing a book or a movie. Most of it is I'm a hired gun. I hope to get paid for doing something and make a living at, put my kids through college. Well, it's too late for that. They're already finished. And my daughter is finishing directing her first feature film, which she also wrote. Anyway, yes. No, that's not true. It's not in Doyle, and Doyle is my Old Testament. Basically, we learn that Holmes is a cocaine addict in the second novel, The Sign of the Four, where Watson describes watching Holmes shoot up. What is it today, the cocaine or morphine? Cocaine, he answered, a 7% solution. Would you care to try it? A lot of people have tried to deny that Holmes was a cocaine addict. There have been very elaborate excuses and explanations, and Sherlock was teasing a gullible Watson, all kind of things like that. And I said, you're missing the point. You're confusing heroes with gods. If a man jumps into a raging torrent to save a drowning child, we can probably agree that he performs a heroic act. If the same man jumps into the same stream to save the same kid and does it with a ball and chain attached to his leg, is he more or less heroic? I would argue that Holmes's addiction throws his heroism into sharper relief. He functions or tries to function despite it. And as we all know from that masterpiece, The 7% Solution, it is his doctor who, reading an article about cocaine in the Lancet, gets Sherlock to Vienna to be cured of his addiction. When I started reading about Holmes, Doyle, and Freud, the first thing you realize, oh, they're both doctors. They both died in the same town within 9 years of each other. Holmes is a cocaine addict. Sigmund Freud, for a time, also was addicted. Sigmund Freud got interested in cocaine when he collaborated on a paper with two ophthalmologists, Königstein and Kohler, on the uses of cocaine as an anesthetic during eye surgery. Arthur Conan Doyle studied ophthalmology in Vienna. How many dots do we need to connect? And later on, I find out that Sigmund Freud's favorite bedtime reading was, you guessed it, Sherlock Holmes. And when you read Freud's case histories, the Rat Man, Anna O, the Wolf Man, sometimes they read like Watson. So it's not too far-fetched to believe that he may have been slightly influenced by Watson's style as a chronicler. In fact, at one point, Freud writes, I followed the labyrinth of her mind, Sherlock Holmes-like, until it led me to... Get it? Okay. So yes, sorry. Yes. No one said it wasn't. No, we didn't. We're not saying it's illegal. What is interesting is that Watson, as a doctor, decrying the use of it, was certainly in advance of conventional medical opinion, which, like opium, everybody was saying, so what? Sorry. Well, there's a lot of way of interpreting art. Everybody, we're people who put messages in bottles. You lose all proprietary authority over what you've created when it's finished. So you throw the bottle out there, hope somebody's going to find it, pop the cork and read what you put inside. But you're probably not going to be there when it happens, looking over their shoulder, going, no, that's not gum, that's gun. People are going to make of it what they will. And for a long time, they didn't want me in the Sherlock Holmes, the Baker Street Irregulars, which was my big fantasy, was getting to join, because I had used his cocaine addiction as established in the stories and built on it. And they were busy denying it. Artists are always ahead of the curve anyway. When Stravinsky wrote Sacre de Printemps, and they performed it, riot in the theater, woman yelling down, I've never been so insulted in my life. And Stravinsky and Pierre Monteux had to get out of town on a train. And 30 years later, it's the soundtrack to Fantasia, and who cares? If you insist. Well, first of all, I believe copies of my memoir are back there in which I relate the story. But for the benefit of those of you who have better things to do than read my memoir, what I discovered about Bill was that he had done so much television, not just Star Trek, but T.J. Hooker, and he never stopped working. And by the way, he had imperatives that made him keep working. He had 3 daughters and a wife with had difficulties, and in television you get into a lot of bad habits. If nobody falls down, you print it and just go on. And he was very sort of protective of Kirk and prone to sort of striking attitudes. And we came to a moment in the film where he's facing off with Ricardo Montalban, Khan. Yes, that's his real chest. He's cooked up his own retaliatory surprise for Khan as these ships are about to square off. And he has a line. The line is, "Here it comes." And the first time he says it, he says, "Here it comes." And I said, Bill, this guy is really smart. You know, if you're talking in that sarcastic, you're telegraphing, let's, tone it down a little bit. And it came out sort of, "Here it comes again, here it comes." And I said, "I'm sorry, that was no good for sound. Can we do it again?" And the next time the focus was soft. And I found out that when he got bored, he got good because he stopped doing this and striking attitudes. It's the director's job among many jobs. The director's like an orchestra conductor. Your job is to get the best you can out of the players and somehow get them to meld together and figure out, you're the audience. What are you bumping on? How to help them. And the way Bill got helped was and I think he caught on to it after a while, it just, I said, "Could we try it again?" And I think he gives a great performance. By the way, he was a great actor. He could do it. But he'd gotten into, another way of working, and television also encourages that. Maybe not so much now as then, because maybe the basic quality is higher. But that's how the performance was achieved. Folks, I'll do 2 more and then we got to stop because we're all ready for a retirement here. Somebody said, "Where ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise." And I told myself, numbers I'm not so good at, that he was in the public domain. If I had known that he was not in the public domain, I probably wouldn't have written the book. And all I can tell you is it was no 7% solution. They took a bite out of all of it. And then Les Klinger, who's famous, the annotator, he's the one who took him to court and broke him. And now everybody can write. You can all write your own Sherlock Holmes stories. I finally got into I'm BSI. Don't you forget it. Anyway, one more. No more. Thank you all so much.
Nicholas, I want to thank you so much for coming. I knew the minute I met you at our Speakers Bureau that you would be the absolute ultimate speaker for us. And I think everybody here today can agree with that. Nicholas is going to be signing his books in the back of the room. Please stop by and meet with him. And thank you all for coming today. Thank you.